That passes unanimously. Discussion of possible action on the CAD AVL Consultant Services contract.
Okay, so as we discussed in previous meetings, we have decided to proceed ahead with selecting a consultant to help us through a larger CAD AVL technology project. We received 4 proposals, and out of those 4, we chose to bring 3 in for interviews, and the review team, which consisted of staff from Metro Ride, CCIT, and the City Community Development Department, agreed that SRF consultants out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, is the best choice. Out of the 4 proposals we received, the costs ranged from $54,000 on the low end to over $150,000 on the higher end. So this contract would be for an amount not to exceed $106,279. That's a little bit above our initial, what we were expecting, which would be in the range of $75,000. But we felt that when we looked at the responses, this one kind of had the most experienced team, the most appropriate project hours, and was probably the best value for money. The issue with some of the proposals that came in that were lower were that the scope of the project would have left vulnerabilities in this project. Like they could say, help us do the needs assessment, help us select a vendor and write the RFP, but not help us with the implementation part, which could expose us to some risk. SRF has a really good track record with these types of projects. They recently did a project for the city of Eau Claire, and I got a positive reference from Eau Claire, as well as Muskegon County in Michigan, where they did an identical project, and they have done a lot of work for the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. They have a staff that some of which has previously dealt with Metro Ride when they were doing performance reviews for as a client, or with WisDOT as their client. So they have some familiarity with Wausau, and they're regionally located. So in the event that we would need them to come out for more in-person meetings than we have scheduled, they'd be available, and they wouldn't have to be flying from California or Boston or somewhere far out. So we were extremely impressed with the team. The general structure of kind of how they're going to help us through this project is it's going to be project management and project support. So they'll help us define the needs, look at Metro Ride, look at our existing conditions, and determine what we really need as a technology solution. They'll then help us write the RFP, which is an extremely complicated and technical process. Some of these RFPs for technology systems can be hundreds of pages long and extremely technical, so they'll help provide a lot of support with that. And then what they'll do is they will help us implement, they'll help us test the system, they'll help us make sure that the vendor that we've selected through the competitive RFP process, which they'll help with vendor selection as well, but make sure the vendor is adhering to the terms of the RFP. This has been a common area where these projects really break down, is when, the transit system thinks they're buying one technology piece and they have limited functionality. So this will kind of be like a neutral party that will help us technically test all of the capabilities of the system that we get and implement it properly. And, they'll just kind of help us through this project. So we're recommending that, the Transit Commission kind of authorizes us to proceed ahead with this contract. Legal's reviewed it, and, we've gone through final negotiations with SRF as well. So it's, legal is on board with this.
Any questions, comments? Go ahead.
I think, and I saw it in there, but I just wanted to verify. So the 106 project costs, a lot of that is coming from CARES Act funding?
I'm sorry, I forgot to clarify. So this is entirely fully funded with CARES already. Okay. This will come out of the total project budget, which is over $1 million. So we're still within that kind of percentage range that you should generally spend on project support for a technology project. And there's no local match to that. The money's already there. It's been obligated, and the onus is on us at this point to kind of spend it efficiently at this point.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion to accept. Okay, we have a motion by Turner, second.
By Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Discussion and possible action on updated public transportation agency safety plan.
So I would like to invite our Deputy Director, Megan Newman, up to talk a little bit about this item.
So we just finished up with our triennial review with the FTA, and one of the obligations that was to update our PTAS plan to include infectious diseases likely coming from the COVID. And so if you look at number 18, line item 7, exposure to infectious disease plan. Metro Ride is committed to efforts aimed at reducing the spread of infectious disease. Staff performs routine cleaning, provides hand sanitizer, masks, and other PPE on board vehicles when requested by passengers. Metro Ride works in conjunction with the Marathon County Health Department and Marathon County Emergency Services to stay up to date with CDC guidelines to mitigate the spread of infectious disease. And this just needs to be approved by the committee.
Any further questions on that? If not, we'll take a motion to approve.
Have a question.
Go ahead.
So, if you get a high rate of COVID from the health department, then that's when you decide to put the plexiglass back in on the buses?
Yep, we still have those on standby in case something were to happen and we need to use them again. They are still on the buses, or I'm sorry, in our facility, so we could put them back on the buses.
Okay.
Just to add that that's kind of like a suite of tools that we would have to deal with any sort of uptick in respiratory illnesses, as well as giving drivers N95 masks, sanitizing the buses, gloves, PPE, all of those things.
Okay. Go ahead, Carol. Oh. You can,
Okay.
definitely.
I'll motion to approve.
Okay, great.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Transit Director's Report.
So just a couple items to touch up on where we are with a few things. So staffing, we are continuing to make progress. We made an offer and received an acceptance for a mechanic. So if all of that pans out, we will be fully staffed for mechanics. Mechanics are kind of like unicorns. So, again, fingers crossed that, everything works out. But we've had that position open, I believe, since November of 2022. We are fully staffed for full-time operators, and we have some openings for part-time operators that we're trying to fill. But in general, we're doing pretty well with staffing. Dealing with absences and illnesses can be a little bit of a challenge, but we're in a much better position than we were about a year ago. So staffing's in good shape. As far as fleet goes, the fleet we're continuing to make some headway. It's an older fleet, which is challenging. We're continuing to look for funding sources to get some new vehicles. The state might have some capital funding available that we wouldn't be able to replace that whole family of older 2009 Gilligs, but maybe between 1 and 3 of them. So I'm looking at that. I'm also looking at some leftover money that might be at the VW settlement fund, which is where we got our most newest buses from. So we're continuing to kind of look for some funding opportunities, as well as trying to address the overall issue of transitioning to a more electric fleet, I guess. So continuing to work on that. The used buses that we received from Waukesha are in service. One of the used buses or donated buses from Duluth is in service, and the other one we're working on getting in service relatively quickly. Those are larger 40-foot buses, which are needed, especially because we're seeing some pretty high ridership from the schools already. Normally, ridership spikes a bit once we get into the crappier weather, but we've already seen quite a busy school year. So fleet continues to be an area where we're pushing forward. As far as the WIPTA trip went, myself went with representatives from Stevens Point, Racine, Milwaukee, and Madison, and we met with all of our congressional officials and our 2 senators to discuss the importance of transit. We continued to advocate for increased funding, increased federal support, mainly on the operating side, but also on the capital side. as I'm sure you know, Wisconsin does not provide a tremendous amount of operating support. So that's an area where, we're looking for the federal government to kind of increase their spending in to help us run more service on the street. So when I went, I sort of discussed the condition of our facility and older fleet, and what that means is essentially with an older fleet, the cost of repairing these older vehicles eats more into your operating expenses, which means ultimately impacts how much service you can operate. So, I sort of expressed the need for us to kind of try to break that cycle and get out of the fleet deficit so that we can spend as much operating money as we can on service. And the last item is the triennial review. FTA does these every 3 years, and they sort of audit everything in the transit system that's under the sun. And they look through a number of areas for compliance or non-compliance, ranging from financial to operations to maintenance to your safety plan. They look at, I think it's 21 areas is what they looked at in this review. And 3 of the areas we had what they call deficiency in, which are areas we need to improve on, which was, procurement, the public transit agency safety plan, which will be addressed. And there was, I believe, one other area that I'm blanking on, but they'll be fairly quick for us to address, and we will probably get those deficiencies closed out before the final triennial report is even published, which is a good position to be in. So fairly routine things like with procurement, it was missing federal clauses. So, and for the PTAS plan, it was a missing infectious diseases plan, which is a relatively new requirement. So a lot of these things we just need to stay on top of. And for the next review, I think we'll be in really good shape. But certainly compared to other systems, for a robust triennial review, that's about what most systems our size would be looking at. A couple deficiencies, which are really just areas that you kind of just need to pay more attention to moving forward. So any questions?
Sorry, not a question, but I just wanted to thank you, Megan, all your staff for everything you do. It's such an important service, and I personally really appreciate everything that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
If no further questions, we're on adjournment. I'll take a motion to adjourn. I guess we want to stay. Okay, got a motion by Turner, second by,
Second it.
thank you. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. Bye-bye.